Start today's lesson. Just wanted to share a few things, personal lessons that I learned over the last week or so. As all of you know by now, that alhamdulillah I became a father last week, because of which I couldn't have that class. So before, when we had found out that, Jazakallah, when we had found out that, alhamdulillah, family was expecting, there was a question that should we find out the gender of the child or not? We're going to ultrasound, so should we find out or not? And this was something which I had heard it from people, that you can, and it's not definite, though from a completely medical perspective, it's not absolutely definite that that will be the gender of the child. But I was asked that should we do this? And I thought to myself that when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions in the end of Surah Luqman, those 5 things that only Allah knows. Inna Allah indahu ilmu as-sa'ah wa yunazzilu al-ghayth wa ya'lamu ma fil arham. Allah is the one who knows what is contained in the womb or in the wombs. When Allah has mentioned this, then if a person goes beyond that and says, you know what, I want to see what is in the womb, I want to know if it's a male or a female, or if it's a twin or triplets or quadruplets or quintuplets or whatever, if a person isn't trying to challenge Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's knowledge by saying that, oh, I also know. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's knowledge is unparalleled. You cannot challenge Allah's knowledge. So Allah knows completely what is contained in the womb. And now my personal experience was that when we had gone for an ultrasound in the 20-something week, the doctors were a bit alarmed that our child's nasal bone wasn't visible. So it became a thing of concern for us, that that's the first sign of Down syndrome, for a child's nasal bone to not be visible. Now, had we relied on the ultrasound, then we would have been very worried that, okay, the doctors are saying that the nasal bone isn't visible. But alhamdulillah, when our child was born, our daughter was born, the nose was perfectly fine. Right? So 5 things that only Allah knows, right? I felt appropriate to not delve into the gender, find out the gender of the child. I said, well, we'll find out, like how thousands and millions of children before us, were born to parents before us, and those parents didn't know what gender their children were, or how many children they were going to deliver at that time. And the second thing, because we didn't know what gender the child was going to be, and when our daughter was born, it was a complete surprise for us. So, my heart was such that, okay, if it's a boy, alhamdulillah. If it's a daughter, alhamdulillah. Either way, this is a ni'mah from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Sometimes what happens is that we become so overwhelmed with projecting our ambitions for that child, whichever child will have. If we have a boy, I'm going to make sure that this boy will have the best opportunity for education. If it's a girl, I'm going to make sure this. And then when a child is born and it's not the gender that we wanted or hoped for, then it leads to the person becoming disappointed. And that's it's a terrible thing, that when Allah has given us a gift of a child, and then you're like, Allah, why did you give me this gender? I wanted a boy instead. Why didn't you give me a boy instead? For all the reasons that parents want boys instead of girls. We are grateful for whatever Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala grants us, right? And the last thing, that fatherhood, and in general parenthood, which alhamdulillah many of the students here are parents, that some of my friends were asking me, like, how do you feel now? It's a completely different feeling, where you feel like so much of responsibility, and it changes your whole life's outlook on how you used to do things before, and now you've got a child to care for. So I went to the masjid, and some of the elders in the community were there, and they're like, oh, first child, it says, is it a boy or a girl? I mentioned that, no, I have a daughter. So I said, okay, now you can be trusted. Now that you have a daughter, now you will treat, you know what trust is, and you know what looking out and being a responsible person is all about. Anyway.